very much. So, for the sake of recording, today is June 6th, and I'm being interviewed by Michelle Corey, the radiant one. All right. And I'm ready. Any question you want to ask, please go ahead.
Yes, wonderful. Well, the first question for my readers, I want to know if you can tell us a little bit about how you became a healer.
Well, as you know, I went through leukemia. I was diagnosed in July 1989 with acute leukemia. It's the kind of leukemia that comes and takes you away, basically. There isn't much room to basically do much if really is in advanced stages. And so anyways, if you want, I could expand on it, but anyways, I was taken to 2 different hospitals. Initially, I went to a friend of mine, a physician who diagnosed and walked me to Alexian Brothers Hospital in San Jose. And about 2 days later, they had to ship me to UCSF, and I could hear people, the paramedics, we are losing him. The temperature, I had no idea could go that high, but it did. It's 104, it's 105 now. What do we do? They were asking this. That's all I remember. And then I found myself in the UCSF hospital. And, it was quite a process. Again, that process brought me totally into grinding halt. I was just stopped. And it was unlike anything I have ever known or heard or read. And I was forced to make do and be, it was the most horrendous kind of chemo. Nowadays, they use a little bit of it in conjunction with other chemotherapies, but at the time, they went totally crazy over it, and they were giving me the chemo day and night. As a result, I was burned on the outside. The skin was really burnt. It's like, somebody poured hot water or hot oil on me. I had blisters and so forth. On the inside, it was even worse. I had candida all over. I had difficulty seeing. Sometimes I could see, sometimes I couldn't. I couldn't hear, and the sounds that I could hear were so annoying, and it was like, I'm being tortured. I couldn't eat. I couldn't even drink water. And everybody thought I'm going to die. But me, I was just angry being in that state. And anyway, so after 3 months of going back and forth, trying to find a person to be a match for me, so they could change the bone marrow. No one was found in my ethnic group amongst Iranians, and we have large Iranian communities really in California, probably in millions. But we couldn't find anybody. There was this line of Iranians that would come and give blood, hoping they could help. And there was no match. My sister was here in the United States at the time. She wasn't a match. So out of desperation, at one point they said, if his platelet doesn't come, we don't know what to do. We can't even do the autologous transplant, which means, they take your bone marrow, they purge it, they give it back to you. But it's like, if what they take doesn't have what it should have, then what's the point? And anyways, I think my first healer, I found this out after many years of the actual event, was my wife. She was going to work, and then she was coming back to the hospital, and Professor Reese, the chief of the oncology department at UCSF, said that, platelets are not coming back. We absolutely don't know what to do. And my wife asked him, what is it that you need to have for this process to work? And he says, we at least should have a few thousand platelets by next week, or I'm totally dumbfounded. I don't know what to do anymore. And she said, well, you're going to have a few platelets at least in a week, you're going to have at least 1,000 in a few weeks. And later on, a few years after that incident, she told me, she would come and sit and kind of guard me. She told me that she was sitting and she was making platelets for me. And she would imagine platelets like these really cute, lovely guys, had their hair nicely groomed and bow ties and tuxedos and all that. And lo and behold, in 3 days, I had 700 platelets.
In your body?
Yeah, they could actually measure 700. I could not produce any platelets. They kept on basically giving me the platelets, infusion. And anyway, so out of desperation, at some point they said, okay, that's the best we could have. The platelets started to increase to, I think, around 60,000. The minimum is 145,000 for me, for men, or at least the lab that works with UCSF Hospital. And I had about 60. And Professor Reese, as well as other physicians, told us that that's the maximum amount of platelets your body can generate, because that's what you're giving it. So they almost killed me again with chemotherapies and all that. I was just a breath away from physical death. I had nothing to go on. And then they gave me that horrendous chemo. They removed the as much as they could remove of bone marrows, stem cells. And it wasn't much, but that's all they could do. And then they gave me those horrendous chemo again, and almost totally killed me. And then they inject back the bone marrow, the purged bone marrow, and I started to revive. And a few years ago, my wife was really curious to know, how is my blood cell. So I complied. We gave a blood test through one of these magazines. I think it's called Life Extension. You could ask for a blood test and so forth. And platelets was like 165,000. So not much, still above minimum. But the doctor said it would never come out. It will never be more than 60,000. So here I am in normal range, very close to minimal amount of platelets. But all the records are broken. All the beliefs are shattered. In that community, it's like, wow, so it can happen. Even though we gave the bone marrow that had a maximum of 60,000, it went over there. Well, we don't know what happened, they say. Anyways, so tell me if this is too much.
No, just perfect. This is all so good. I want everyone to hear this.
Right. So, anyways, as a result of the chemotherapies, I went into a grand mal seizure. And at the time I was home, and I was released from hospital. I was home. I was going to the UCSF clinic 3, sometimes 4 times a week. I would get all these infections in the chest, and I had to inhale. I think the drug was pentamidine or something. I don't know why I remember the names after 22 years, but I do. I just came. And then, so I had to go back and forth and receive sometimes infusions of red cells, sometimes, platelets, sometimes different things. And so pretty engaged. And anyways, one night I was sitting with my wife and sister, who was in the US at the time. And, they saw me making faces, and then blood started to come through my mouth, and I was biting my tongue. And they thought I'm making some kind of silly gesture, and then they realized it's seizure. So the paramedics at Altabate hospitals, and I'm underlining the name, didn't know how to deal with a grand mal seizure patient. So they actually tied me up, or they tried to tie me up. And they were injecting, tranquilizers like Valium, but in the process of injection, they tore up the muscles of my arm. And, because they were trying to hold me down, I think 7 vertebrae broke. 4 of them crushed in the lumbar part, and when I say crushed, I mean crushed. Like more than 70% of the vertebrae was smashed. And the ribs, my left rib cage, left ribs were broken as a result. And they took me back again to the UCF hospital. And they said, to prevent you from being paralyzed, we have to cast you. And I said, no. They said, what do you mean no? I said, no. And I started to move to get out of the bed. I said, what are you doing? I said, I'm going home. They said, what do you mean you're going home? I said, not a day in hospital. I'm not going to spend a day in the hospital anymore. And they called Professor Reese. You know, we had a bonding. He's a very nice man. And I haven't talked to him for many years, by the way, but very good human being, very wonderful physician. And he came and he begged and pleaded and said, you know what, just give me a day. I said, for what reason? He said, to get you a hospital bed, that's all. At your home, from the comfort of your home, so you have a bed that would support your back. I can't let you go like this. So I agreed, and 24 hours later, I was in my small apartment in Emeryville. And, you know, a friend of my wife came after that incident, and I looked like this giant Chinese guy, you know, with some mustache on the sides of the lips hanging and totally bald, and, you know, eyebrows were almost totally gone, and a little bit of beard, you know, just like, you know, a Chinese guy, you know, and very inflated, you know, fluid retentions and so forth. And this friend of my wife comes and looks at my eyes and says, I don't think you're dying. And I looked up, and for the first time I realized everyone thinks I'm dying. I said, heck no, I'm not. You know, I'm just angry being in this position. Of course I'm not going to die. And she burst into laugh. And then I looked at Patty and said, oh, she was thinking that too. So anyways, after a few months, you know, after a few days, I started to walk on the hallways, and, you know, everybody was surprised that I could actually walk. And then my wife took me to Iran. Part of the reason was that, you know, my father was there and my family members were there, and everybody thought, you know, that's his last visit. So I went there to Iran, and a day before I came back to the US again, my cousin, who's a neurosurgeon and studied in Chicago and went back home and has a very successful practice, and he also teaches in universities. He put me in touch with this person that they said he's a Grand Master Healer, and to me it's like, what is a healing? What is a Grand Master Healer? What does that all mean? So a day before I went to him, and right away I realized that there is nothing wrong with my eyes, because I could see this very beautiful green around his beads. And as soon as I noticed it, I started to notice his aura. It's like, wow, such beautiful violet colors around him. And then I started to see auras on my sister and my brother-in-law and all that. And so forth, and I realized, oops, okay, I think I know where I am. I think this is what I want. And, you know, my sister came down with a horrendous, very difficult migraine headache while we were there. And my brother-in-law said to Master Parvarandeh, you know, if you permit, please, we must go. And he said, you just came. And he said, yeah, but, you know, she has this migraine headache. He said, okay, that's no problem. So, you know, he started to send a huge burst of energy towards him that almost shocked me, because I got it too. And, you know, her headache was gone. So now I'm crying. You know, it's like, now I know what's going on here. So, anyways, his best student at the time was the best clairvoyant, and he was seeing my aura, her aura, my brother-in-law's aura. You know, there were some scientists sitting there, People from magazines and universities were there, but he wasn't officially allowed to do healing. The system felt threatened by him. And he was doing healing from this house and that house. And the next day I went, just before my flight, I went to him and I said, Master Parvarandeh, I'm taking 30,000 milligrams of vitamin C just to be functional. Otherwise, I get this horrendous, very difficult muscle spasm, and it's very painful. I don't know if I can handle it in the plane if I don't take the vitamin C. Then he said, okay, then don't, or do, I don't know. I said, will you do some healing? I don't want to take it. He said, well, we are here not for healing, but for gathering and exchange. And I said, will you please do some healing? Because I want to stop taking 30 grams of vitamin C or 30,000 milligrams of vitamin C. And he says, okay, he was kind of hesitant for some reason, but he did do some work on me. And I said, you can go. And I went and I didn't take the vitamin C. And up to this day, if I take vitamin C, it's because I want to. It's good nutrition. It's good antioxidant. But I didn't need it anymore, At the time, before I met him, there was no solution for the muscle spasm that I had as a result of the chemotherapy. Sometimes I would fall like a piece of 2x4, just fall flat on my face or on my side, and I couldn't move, and tears would come out of pain. I couldn't even produce any sounds. And I heard my friend Linus Pauling, the chemist who won 2 Nobel Prize, saying, I put vitamin C in my vodka. Take vitamin C all the time. Worst case scenario, you pee it out. Just take it. It's really good. So that's why I started to take vitamin C and so on and so forth, and then raised to 30 grams. And that's what I really told Master Parvarandeh. So that's how I came to know him, and I came back to US, and I couldn't just, I wasn't in my skin. I just wanted to go back. Our finances were at rock bottom. We were actually very poor at the time. And I didn't know how to break that news to my wife that I really want to go back again, And so finally I did, and I told her that I really feel the need to go back. And to my surprise, she said, of course you have to go. So we borrowed the money for the ticket, and I went back to Iran again. And this time I spent 40 days straight with the master as he was doing healings, from 6 a.m. to 7, 8, 9 p.m. And I observed him at works, and he right away started to like me, and I was kind of embarrassed in front of the crowd. Why is he liking me? And so, he would constantly ask me to come and sit close to him, and people would push, so I would vacate the space so people go close to him. And at one time he got really upset. He said, you don't like me, do you? I said, Master, what are you talking about? He said, why are you going there? I tell you to sit here. I said, well, the crowd is anxious to be near you, and I'm vacating. He says, no, the crowd can go back. So, a couple of days after I went for the second time to Iran, my wife called me and said, you have to come back right away. And I said, why? And she said, you have hepatitis A, you have hepatitis B, you have hepatitis type C, you have all the hepatitis, and you must undergo treatments. And I said, no. And she said, what do you mean no? I said, I'm in good hands, just give me a few days. So I mentioned to one of his students, she a student that was managing the appointments, and she told the master that, he's not going to tell you, but he really is in need of healing. And he said, okay, no problem, I could make an exception. And, at the time the crowd was sitting, and, people would come with their back towards him, and he would do some healing, and they would go, and the next person would come, and so on. And he put his beads on my right shoulder, and it was hot, and it was like a hot knife going through butter. And then he laid hands on my kidneys and on my liver, and he said, okay, that's it. And I said, that's it. what does it mean, Master? And he said, well, I've done what I was supposed to do today. I said, can I go for a blood test? And I said, it's up to you. And so I did, of course. And a few days later, as I said, my cousin was a physician, so he wrote all the tests and so forth. So I right away went to a lab and I had all the tests done. And a few days later, all the enzymes were 80% better, 45% better, and soon thereafter, I had no hepatitis B, I had no hepatitis type A. There was some persistence of hepatitis type C, but it was obvious healing is happening.
Right.
And my first meditation was at his presence. I noticed a grain of rice on the floor. And I said, if what he's saying is true and everything has energy, that grain of rice must have energy. So I started to inhale and bring in the energy from the rice into me. And I got really hot. And I was really surprised, so I stopped. And I did it again. I got really hot again. And I said, okay. So that was my first unofficial, maybe unwanted, meditation, really. Prior to that, I did not do any meditation ever. I believed in 3 magic words, just like real estate that I was doing, before being diagnosed. In real estate, we have 3 magic words: location, location, location. And what I believed was logic, logic, logic. And of course, I discovered that logic kills. Anyways, then I sat there and, days in, days out, and I thought, okay, the master is working and I can now take in some of his energies and utilize it because, it's abundant. So he started to work and I started to take in the energy as I was inhaling. And again, I started to get hot. I started to get tingling and all that. And, I could see now his aura. I could see the patient's aura and so on and so forth. And then all of a sudden I became very shameful. I was ashamed of myself. I said, maybe I'm taking the energy that is supposed to go to that person only. Why am I doing this? So I apologized and I said, Master, that's what I've done. And he laughed, I said, no, you're good. Keep on doing it. You're not going to take away from the patient. You're good. You continue doing what you're doing. So, and I went home that day and my father was really insisting that I take him to Master Parvarandeh. I said, I can't really abuse the privilege. And why do you want to see the master anyways? He says, I'm really curious. I really want to see him. I said, millions of people are curious. I can't add to the burden here. The place has limited space and too many people want to come. So do you have any physical difficulties? And he says, yes, my shoulder really hurts and I really want him to work. I said, okay, then I can think about it, but not right away. He said, you know what? Put your hands on my shoulder and do what he does. Just breathe like him. So I did. And he said, oh my goodness, my pain is gone. So that was my first official healing with my dad. And as soon as he did that again, cry baby, I started to cry. And also, the first time before I met him, once my cousin, who happens to be now a healer, one of Master Parvarandeh's student and a healer, and my sister is a healer in Iran, and my brother-in-law is a healer in Iran, and they run the Healing Institute in Iran. So it's like 3 other members of my family members are Master Parvarandeh's students, and they are doing the healing work in Iran right now. But at the time, none of us were students. Neither was my cousin. But when he mentioned the name, and I came home at that night before meeting with the master, 3:30 a.m. I just woke up, and I went to the farthest corner of my sister's apartment, and I couldn't control myself. I was weeping. And I didn't know, why am I weeping? Why am I weeping here? And I couldn't stop. And, I could try to keep it silent. And ever since, I wake up 3:30 a.m. and that's the time I meditate. 3:30 a.m., you want to join me? Come aboard, 3:30 a.m. since then is the time of my meditation, And prior to that, I sleep for about an hour. So I sleep an hour a night, but I'm horizontal about 6-7 hours. And that seems to be more than enough for me. So that sacred time has become my sacred time for meditation now. 3:30 to 4:30 a.m., that's when I meditate really. Right. So that's how I learned. I came back to the US after the second time. I was so enthusiastic to do healings, I would if eavesdrop. If somebody said, I have knee problem, I would just go ahead and put my hand on the knee and say, what are you doing? I'm healing your knee. It's like people didn't know what to respond. My wife was embarrassed. My friends were kind of laughing and embarrassed too. We would go to a restaurant and the waitress is limping, is like, what's wrong with you? Oh, my hip hurts. Can you come here? And Patty would say, Beros, stop. And I said, no, I can't stop. And I would blow and I put my hands on the hip of the waitress. and she would say, oh my God, my pain is gone. I said, yeah, I'm a healer. So I was kind of boasting about it. I had a lot of enthusiasm. And 3 months later, oops, I realized I did it again. How disrespectful. How shameful. I didn't ask for his permission. So I tried to call and it was really difficult. It was really difficult for me, for anyone to talk to him on the phone because he was so busy. People from all over the world would go to Iran, even the some of the clergymen, would come under the cloak of night or from the back door to get healing from him and so forth. And, he was very much in demand. So it was difficult to talk to him, but I managed. And, we talked and I said, Master, I'm very, very sorry. Without your permission, I started to do healing. And he said, what do you say when you do healing? And I said, Bismillah, which means in the name of God. He said, no. You have to say Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, which means in the name of God who is kind and merciful. And ask for divine intervention. Then you can do work. I permit you. Yes, you can work. But you cannot work on cancer patients because you still have some cancer in you. And I said, fine. And then, in about a year time, when he came to the US, I asked for his permission and he said, yes, you can work on cancer patients, use the same words. And then amongst all his students, I was the only one that was permitted to do distant healing.
Wow.
And so that's how I became a healer. And he passed in 1997, and I started to work on some of his patients. I had a radio interview and asked people what to do to connect with him and so on, so they don't feel lost. And I picked up some of the patients, and then I started to work on my own. I closed my travel agency in San Francisco, and I just sat home. And I announced to the universe, I'm a healer. No advertising, nothing. And, my wife would ask me, so how do we pay the rent? And I said, what I know is that we are going to pay the rent. I don't know how. Do you want me to continue this way? Michelle, do you want me to continue this way, or do you want to ask questions?
Oh yeah, I think this is great. It's going to inform the rest of it.
Right.
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
Yes. So what happened was, it's like day 28. I'm sitting home, and practically no money. And she goes to work and comes back, but money is very scarce. And day 29 is like there's a knock on the door. I was living in Corte Madera at the time, and on a small apartment, a 2-bedroom small apartment on the second floor. And there's a knock at the door, and with surprise I opened the door, and there is this woman before she says hello, she hands me an envelope. And I said, what is this? She says, hi, I'm such and such. And I said, what is this envelope? She says, may I come in? I said, why do you want to come in? She says, I have sinus problems. The envelope that you have contains a check. I know how much it costs for me to have a surgery. I do not want to have a surgery. I want you to heal it. And I said, I can't accept the check if I don't know how much it is. She said, what do you mean? I said, you pay for my sessions. So, and I said, how do you know about me? And she says, well, I know you healed a horse with the same problem. So the horse name was Bob. And sometime prior to this, a person called and said that, I'm kind of very hesitant to ask, but, I have a horse. I've taken the horse to UC Davis. They opened his forehead and then they closed it. They said, there is nothing we can do. Will you please come and help my horse? And I said, well, I have never worked on animals. Plus, coming and going, it cost me at least half a day. She said, oh, I pay you. I said, I wasn't talking about the money. I was talking about the time. And she said, I just come, pick you up, I bring you back, so you don't have to be concerned about that. And please come. I said, let me think. So I hung up. And as soon as I hung up, it's like I heard this voice in my head. Why not? Why wouldn't you go? So I called back and said, okay, come, pick me up. So I went and I worked on the horse. And initially the horse was showing me, one of those large horses, thoroughbred, a mixture of the English and the Arabian horse. It's called thoroughbred, huge horse, and with a lot of fear, procedures have been done unto him. He did not trust anybody but his owner. And the owner is really holding tight onto him, trying to maintain him. And with his eyes, he's telling me, don't you dare, don't you come close. So, and she asked me, please come and stand next to me and then start to do whatever you want to do. So I stood next to him and I, extended my arm towards the horse and on his forehead, and I started to work. And a few minutes later, his head dropped. And, he made the kind of noises the horses make. And then, he started to nip on my sleeve, the jacket. And he started to look with his beautiful eyes, with big eyelashes, it's like, thank you, please continue. And then he had an erection, which made me very, very disturbed. And I said, what's going on here? She said, that's a good sign. That's a good sign. He's getting the healing. He's getting the healing. And by this time, we have an audience. They were practicing, jumping. Everybody stopped. They are looking at me, and I'm very embarrassed too. So I'm not used to this kind of attention. And I worked, and 2 more times, I think, I went there, and the tumor disappeared. The owner of the horse at the time that I was working on the horse had a sinus infection. And she said her sinus infection cleared up too. So the person that came to my house was one of those audiences that was there at the time that I was doing healing. And he knew I could peel sinuses, so that's why he came to me. And he said, open please the envelope. And, she came home and I opened the envelope and there is $10,000 check.
Wow.
And I said, wow, thank you. And I said, I can't have this. And she says, she started to cry. She says, you're not going to work on me? I said, no, I'm going to work on you. You pay for my sessions. So she reluctantly accepted. We worked on her. The first time that I was working on her, I was, in my mind, I was bringing laser lights that, kind of takes care of the infection and the, everything that is wrong in the sinus and so forth. And, I could see smoke even coming, and I could smell of burnt and so forth. And as I'm feeling all this, she looks up, I was standing behind her. She looks up with teary eyes and says, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? She said, I smell burned. And I feel like my sinuses are opening up. And we both started to cry. It's like, oh my God, she actually felt and saw what I was doing, you know. And again, 3 sessions later, you know, she said, when should I go for a test? I said, well, you know, anytime you want to. But she came 2 more times and she went to have a scan done, and she said, sinus is clear. And then she left. Then she came back and she's pounding on the door. And I opened, I said, what happened? She said, you must take this. You must take this. I said, I can't take this being a check again. She said, it's not that much. Just please take it. If you don't take it, I'm not going to leave your home. So it was a check for $2,000. I said, oh, okay, reluctantly and happily at the same time. I had my rent. You know, I was late for, you know, a few days, and I paid like, I think, $35 penalty because I was late for the rent. But I had my rent, and I didn't even advertise. So by now people are telling me, you should have a business card. You should have a business card. You should have. And it's like, well, you know, I got to ask my mentor. So, you know, he came to our house. We started to go back and forth, and, you know, he came to our house, and I asked him, you know, Master, everybody is asking me for a business card. Should I have one? And he turned, he looked at my eyes, he says, why? And I said, thank you. I got the message. And up to this day, I do not have a business card. You know, people come here and it's just the word of the mouth. You know, you heal, you tell your loved ones, and they have no reason not to believe you, right? So they may come and they tell, you know, other people, friends and acquaintances, and that's how, you know, people come to me. And once they come to me, then we ask them, please go to the site. You know, there are some testimonials there if you want to have more information. And of course, over the years, you know, I think for the first time officially, I was called Master Healer Danadoost in 2007, in the first day of the class that I started. 2007 was the first time that I started to teach. And Mary Grace addressed me as Master Healer Danadoost. So ever since, I'm Master Healer Danadoost.